Hi, my name is Carrie Jernigan, and I will be doing a presentation on the cultural audit of Enron. Just bear with me, this is the first time I've ever done this, so if there's any technical difficulties, I apologize, but we'll get through it. Alright, so Enron was a corporation founded in 1985 by Ken Lay. It became an international company and grew very quickly. It was based out of Houston, Texas, and became the 7th largest corporation in the United States very quickly. Jeffrey Skilling is another key player that joined the company and became the Chief Operating Officer in 1990. He was chosen by Ken Lay to pretty much be the president of the company. Originally, Enron was focused on energy commodities, trading energy commodities, but ventured into other businesses when desperation struck. The escalation of commitment rose as basically the internal parts of Enron were falling apart, but they put on a facade and started coming up with all these different ideas to make money, including one with a deal with Blockbuster involving movies on demand. So that was a whole fiasco that never came to fruition and ultimately started unraveling the lies behind Enron. There was a lot of other businesses created by Andrew Fastow, which was the chief financial officer, and those businesses were fake businesses, over 100 of them, to hide the losses of Enron. Enron had over 30,000 employees, all of whom lost their retirements and pensions, and just as quick as Enron rose, they fell even faster. Within a month's time frame in December 2001, they filed for bankruptcy. It was, I believe, 63 billion, in bankruptcy. It was the largest at the time and still one of the largest bankruptcies in the United States. Basically, it collapsed after a whistleblower by the name of Shara Watkins. She was an accountant. She started seeing all the illegal activity and all the things that were like, this is a problem, and she brought it to light, and it pretty much unraveled there. The corporation was plagued by bad business practices and unethical leaders. There was a ton of unethical practices. So Enron's formal and informal systems were aligned, but they were aligned in the way that they were pushing employees in the same unethical direction. So their selection system, policy codes, their orientation, performance management, authority structure, their decision processes, their norms, rituals, and the stories surrounding Enron were all aligned in the same idea of macho culture, but it was pushing employees in an unethical direction. So with the formal systems, there was hypocritical leadership. Ken Lay's messages to consumers was far different than the message to employees. The slogan of Enron was "Ask Why." Every time they came up with a new idea or had this aha moment with consumers and investors, they would follow it with "Ask Why." But none of the employees were asking why they were doing things a certain way and bringing up issues that they saw prevalent through the company. Ethics were not a priority in the selection procedures. It was based purely on academic achievement and vetting. It was about who you knew, and it wasn't about any kind of ethical person that you might have been. It was based on purely how smart you were. There was a code of ethics. It was actually a 64-page book that was interesting, updated in July of 2000, just 6 months before they collapsed. But however, it appears to be more of a check in the box, more of a book that's thrown in a drawer instead of something that was actually utilized by employees or the leadership. The performance management system used by Enron was cutthroat. It was based solely on output and the bottom line. They deemed it the rank and yank system, and it definitely bred unethical behavior. This system involved ranking employees on a scale of 1 to 5 by a review committee, 1 being the best, 5 being the worst. It required 10% of people to be ranked a 5, and those people were terminated. So obviously you can see why people felt the pressure to produce. Unethical behavior went undisciplined so long as the violators were making the company money. An example of this was the Valhalla scandal. This involved Louis Bourget, was the president of, or I guess I should say, the president of the Enron Oil Trading, and then it involved Tom Mastroianni, who was the treasurer of that company. They had a bunch of offshore accounts, phony books, and an anonymous tip came in saying that they had taken $3 million of company money and put it in personal accounts. It was brought to the attention by auditors to Ken Lay. The very next day after Ken Lay is informed of all of these facts and evidence pointing to this one illegal and unethical behavior by Louis Burgett, Ken Lay decided that the discipline for that would be absolutely nothing. In fact, he sent a memo to Louis Burgett saying, please keep making us millions. So he understood that he was skimming off the top, but he was also making Enron's millions of dollars, and he called it his golden goose, so he could not fire him. That sent a message to all employees that, they could do whatever they wanted so long as the company was profiting from it. And the traders took on more and more risk, which ultimately led them to risk all of Enron's reserves. So for the formal systems, more of them, the ethical accountability was non-existent. Employees did not take responsibility for their actions or question any actions of their upper echelon. For example, analysts who were actually supposed to be analyzing these stock options just took the word of Jeffrey Skilling and Ken Lay and gave strong buy recommendations if they said so. Otherwise, if they didn't, they became an enemy. Hostile and defensive leadership made reporting unethical behavior impossible. So if you wanted to report something, you knew that was not going to be allowed there. You knew, obviously, based off of Ken Lay's reaction to the Valhalla scandal and other things, that people doing something wrong was okay. It was brushed under the rug. It was not a big deal. So there was no reporting. Ethical dilemmas were not considered by Enron. It was profits were the driving factor of decisions, and this could be seen in the California deregulation. Deregulating California, they took and exported power from these power plants out of California until it drove the prices up, and then imported them back into California to make the profit. They also caused rolling blackouts by calling these power plants and having them shut down to create a shortage. All of these are extremely unethical and I would say illegal too, which came about, but they didn't consider any of the ethics involved in that. They were only concerned with making money. The question wasn't what did you do to make this money? The question became how much money did you make us? And this could be seen with the arbitrage opportunities. Traders were encouraged to be the smartest people to find these opportunities, which were opportunities where they could make more money than would be normal or expected. So for their informal systems, the role models and heroes of the company were obviously Ken Lay and Jeffrey Skilling. They had extravagant top floor offices overlooking the trading floor. They were idolized as the smartest guys in the room, and they were viewed as in control with decisions and trusted by employees. They could do no wrong, and it had this illusion of control. The stories surrounding the role models included things about their manly trips. They took these company trips. Skilling would take other top executives, and these trips were, adrenaline type trips, like the dirt bike trip they took, and it often led to injuries or near-death experiences. These trips were awed and fueled the macho culture of Enron. The ethics talk was non-existent. Many recorded conversations with traders showed how little regard there was for ethical behavior. You could hear them talking about the California deregulation and shutting down the power plants and how they talked about stealing grandma's money. Lay and Skilling did not want to be questioned. They became defensive and did not want to address obvious ethical issues. A reporter once called Jeffrey Skilling and just asked simple questions like, how does Enron make money? And he became extremely upset, saying things like, if you've done your research, then you'd know this. Like, basically calling the reporter incompetent when they asked simple questions that he should have been able to answer. Ethical issues within Enron. This video is already going to be kind of too long probably, but there were so many. Employees at Enron greatly influenced by rotten culture. It's the bad apples versus the bad barrel. Obviously, 30,000 people weren't bad apples. It was the environment. They were influenced by the environment. Despite any moral awareness they might have had, organizational pressures and organizational culture ultimately influenced their ethical judgment and behavior. Just like the Milgram experience, the internal warnings were overrode by the authority, implying that what they were doing was okay. They were being encouraged by Jeffrey Skilling and Ken Lay. They employed a lot of grenades, people they knew were doing unethical things, but still they knew it would make them money that way. The stakeholders, including the shareholders, investors, and employees, they were lied to and misled by Skilling, Fastow, and Anderson, which is the lawyer, by the mark-to-market accounting practices. This was a stipulation of Jeffrey Skilling to be employed with Enron, is that he could use this accounting practice, knowing the kind of things that he could do with it. Stakeholders care, and they would have acted sooner had they had truthful information. Investors would not have invested money in Enron had they known the outcome. Deceiving stockholders allowed top execs of Enron to offload millions of dollars in stock options prior to the bankruptcy. They had insider knowledge. They used this to make sure they got out unscathed. They took as much money as they could, while the people like with PG, Electric, those workers, all of their accounts were frozen. One guy said he had $300,000 in there, and then he was left with $1,200 at the end of all of it. He's still working. More ethical issues. The top executives at Enron were unethical leaders. They were weak moral persons and weak moral managers. Machiavellianism was prominent. They were opportunistic, self-interested, deceitful. Traders and accountants played a large role in unethical behavior. Moral disengagement fueled their approach. They had diffusion of responsibility. They dehumanized the victims and used euphemistic language to encourage the traders. Leaders created barriers for employees to practice ethical behavior. They had the illusion of control, illusion of optimism, and ultimately they had that escalation of commitment. They became desperate. They were too involved to back out. They were too involved to tell the truth. They had to find more and more ways to hide the lies until it was too late. Ethical problems that were unaddressed. Human resource issues. They had unfair performance review practices, as you can see with their performance review committee. It encouraged unethical behavior that led to termination. Conflicts of interest. They were the largest corporate donor to the presidential campaign, George W. Bush. And Andrew Fastow created LGAM to self-deal and to hide Enron losses. Skilling was aware of this. The banks were aware of this. And there was a lot of people that had their hand out making a lot of money off of this. So everyone is complicit, the ones that knew about this. The use of corporate resources was inappropriate as well. Enron Energy Services were led by the invisible CEO Lou Pai. Lou Pai spent large sums of corporate money at the strip club taking out employees. This went unchecked and never questioned because he was making the company money. He ultimately made enough money that he got out before the crash of Enron and was criminally not charged with anything. He actually became the second largest landowner in Colorado, and he obviously didn't have a problem with unethical behavior because it's how he got out so quickly. Oops. And then customer confidence issues. Enron had a fiduciary responsibility to stakeholders, but knowingly deceived employees and investors. When Jeffrey Skilling knew that there was no way Enron was making money and it was just all this facade, he was still seen encouraging everyone to contribute their max contributions to their 401k despite selling off his own stock. And obviously they had no regard for customers in California during the rolling blackouts. How they were affected: 30,000 employees lost their jobs, billions of dollars of investor money was lost, pensions of people evaporated, and numerous top executives, including Jeffrey Skilling and Ken Lay, received prison time. How could this have been avoided? It could have been avoided by having the corporation formed on, a values-focused corporation, aligning the formal and informal systems with the ethical focus instead of the greed and the money-making and based off of Machiavellianism. The ethical leadership that prioritizes ethical employees over top producers. So when Ken Lay was brought that issue during the Valhalla scandal, he could have addressed it in a way that was setting an example for everyone else having unethical behavior. Swift action to discipline unethical behavior, and then more of a reporting system that takes complaints of inappropriate behavior seriously. Nobody felt like they could say anything because it was acceptable. It's what they expected, and people were getting away with it, and a lot of people were making money. They were getting millions of dollars in bonuses for this unethical behavior because they were producing. There was no questions asked of how they were getting it done. They should have addressed the early warning signs that something is wrong instead of allowing the deceit to continually grow in hopes that it could turn around. And obviously the main sources for this presentation was the documentary, The Smartest Guys in the Room, but where noted in the slides, I also have these two sources listed here. Thanks.